Hello, everyone. Today we're going to see a webinar on native agent-based monitoring in ServiceNow. Giving the webinar today is myself, Chris Dow, Chad Whaley, and Cameron Stone. First, a little bit about Fruition Partners. Essentially, we are how IT harnesses the power of the cloud. We're a cloud integration firm with a specialization in innovation and IT service management. We're founded in 2003, and we are the premier partner of ServiceNow.com. We offer technology-enabled professional services supported by a team of over 100 cloud experts, and have delivered over 150 enterprise implementations where we build and manage mission-critical cloud solutions on the ServiceNow platform. So just a quick note today about the team that's bringing you this webinar. So this is my team, the products and platform team. We focus on basically platform development. So what does that mean? If you have a ServiceNow implementation and you've rolled out a few of the modules in the IT service management suite, maybe incident change, CMDB, asset, what have you, what's next? We build custom enterprise scalable applications to manage almost anything in the enterprise that's not under that umbrella. We take the basic building blocks of ServiceNow, the best-in-class workflow engine, the database system, the cloud SaaS nature of the tool, email handling and processing, and we build enterprise scalable applications. We've done some very amazing work at partners like Coca-Cola, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and some of the greatest social networks in Silicon Valley, where we build custom solutions to manage data centers, to manage access management, to build ServiceNow systems that integrate with telephone systems that take inbound calls and route them directly into ServiceNow to log tickets and issues. We've even built solutions for clients like Fermilab, where lab equipment is integrated with the ServiceNow platform and actually makes outbound calls when issue arise to support technicians to maintain a top level of support. So that's what the platform team is, and we also focus on products as well, where we build custom solutions on some of the platforms you see here. For instance, BombGuard, we have an integration suite that'll enable remote desktop and remote support and control directly from ServiceNow, whether it's clicking on a CI and taking control of that CI remotely from your desktop, or allowing one-on-one support sessions with your end users. All of that can be enabled within ServiceNow. We have partnerships with folks like Twilio that allow us to do integrations with telephone systems, the route calls to and from ServiceNow, make outbound calls and send out SMS messages directly from your instance. Also do some very exciting things with Google. Basically, when you get a notification or approval request and you are a Google Gmail enterprise client, we can bring that ticket, bring in incidents, bring in approvals directly into your ServiceNow instance, directly in your email. And then obviously many other integrations and custom products based on demand per client request, integrating things like Google App Engine, Amazon Web Services, whatever we need to meet the specific nature of the requirements that you guys have. Okay. And so just a quick note on our approach on transformational IT. We have a number of line of businesses internal to Fruition Partners. We do education, ITIL, foundation, and master level training with a pass rate of 93%. We also do ServiceNow specialized training, where we teach folks how to be admins and advanced developers. We also do process consulting, and obviously for implementations, we do process re-engineering and design. We'll come into your organization, take a look at the tools you have and the people you have, and re-engineer that to, specific to IT service management and the ServiceNow model. And obviously, kind of with that, a ton of automations, integration, process automation. Just making an entire IT organization as streamlined as possible, using Service Catalog to automate as many requests, to take as many kind of the manual steps out of top-level service and support delivery to your organization. So we essentially do deliver a deep practical knowledge of ServiceNow, both technology and practical operations management with each engagement. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chad Whaley and Cameron Stone that will do a deep dive on basically server management and agent-based monitoring. Now, with that, I'll toss it over to them.
So it's not going to be death by PowerPoint today, I promise. We're really going to be going through about 6 or 7 slides just to kind of lay the groundwork on what exactly we're going to be going through when I do the demo. But basically, we want to take time today to really demonstrate how the ServiceNow platform can be used to build customized solutions that really eliminate a lot of the gaps that exist between the tools where you're executing your processes and managing your efforts, like ServiceNow, and the tools where that actual work is being done once they get ready to implement what they're doing. So some of the monitoring tools, some of the other management tools that teams have to manage their actual systems, kind of bridge that gap and bring most of that into ServiceNow. Now with this example, in today's webinar, we're really going to demonstrate that through the use of a custom-built agent-based monitoring solution. But the big piece is that it's managed natively inside of ServiceNow. So there's no separate interface, there's no special integration, everything's kind of built off of that ServiceNow platform. So all the activities you do in ServiceNow is actually driving activity outside in the real world. So why is monitoring a good example to cover this kind of thing? If you look at monitoring tools, there's some challenges with them when you start talking about taking the things that monitoring management teams do and bringing them into an IT service management tool and process execution. Bidirectional information is extremely difficult to build between IT service management tools where you're doing your incident and event management and the systems where that data is actually being defined and tracked. You have to build custom integrations for getting those two tools to talk to one another. Correlation and suppression can also be a bit of a challenge because now you've got two environments that are trying to collect the same bits of information, but they're not necessarily talking the same language. ServiceNow's CMDB relies heavily on relationship management and relations between items. Your monitoring tool may or may not do that. And if it does, it may do it in a data structure that isn't the same as how ServiceNow manages the CMDB. There's also challenges around escalations. So if an event is happening quite a bit, so you're getting a lot of chatter from your monitoring tools, how does that escalate up to maybe from an event to an incident or increase the priority or severity of that event or incident? Those are all things that have to be worked out on a case-by-case basis when you integrate different systems, because the flow of the data and the management structure of that information may not be the same. Data alignment, that's a component that goes into the other items I just talked about, but really foundationally you have two different tool sets that you're trying to get to speak the same language, and those metrics may not even exist in a lot of cases. One of my more common examples that I see is a monitoring tool will only have a concept of a priority, whereas in ServiceNow you're trying to manage you're trying to manage your ITIL processes from an incident and event management standpoint using a combination of impact and urgency to drive a priority. So when that monitoring tool tries to send a priority over, what kind of assumptions do you have to make about the impact and urgency so that there's no ambiguity between what that ITIL process needs, what flow that ITIL process needs to go through, and what that event really is trying to tell you. And then from a versioning and auditing standpoint, it's extremely difficult to keep some of these environments in sync because a lot of the reporting that you get out of a monitoring tool is more associated with the alerts themselves and not necessarily with managing those alerts, so that if something changes in that environment, or if someone changes a monitor, or if you roll out a new version, where is that new version deployed currently, where do we have gaps, those types of things can be difficult because those tools weren't necessarily built with some of those ITIL practices in mind. Now, there's also some opportunities where you can add or improve some of your processes that are either working or just aren't quite there yet. Fewer tools and integrations is a big one. If you can eliminate a tool or eliminate an integration, that's support costs, that's administration, that's just general team overhead that you can eliminate so you can focus on doing the things that are more added value for your business. Change management is another huge one. So imagine being able to have your monitoring solution implemented inside of ServiceNow, and those monitors are tied back directly to CIs, and in effect they're actually CIs themselves. So when someone brings forward a change to, say, upgrade a business application that you're monitoring with a log file monitor, that enters the change management process. You can see it on the business relationship maps. You can see it when you go to the cab. So you have immediate visibility to the fact that, well, this application is being upgraded. Maybe my log file monitors for this application need to be updated because the log file for that app is now moved. Those types of things, it can take that monitoring team and really embed them into the change management process so that monitors are much easier to keep current, and you're not finding out that the monitor is no longer effective after the change has already been implemented. You can get in front of that. Request management is another big one. Since these monitors are actually defined and managed inside of the tool, the request management process can tie directly into it. So if you've deployed request management, or if you have a service catalog, you can build the requests, let the users fill out the monitoring information requests on what they want, and then if you have a goal for automation, or if you have runbook, things like that, you can actually automatically provision based on those requests. So a user wants to monitor a service on a Windows server. They go into the service catalog, find the request for monitoring a service on a server, fill it out, hit submit. Then based on the workflow, if it gets approved, or if it's something that you would envision as not being required for approval, the system would go in, automatically provision, create that monitor, and then the agent on that server would pick that up and start monitoring as soon as that's approved and created. There's also bulk updates and imports. So for those of you that are already inside of ServiceNow, you've probably seen the list edit feature, some of the other bulk update capabilities that are inside the tool from an administrative point of view. Because those features exist in ServiceNow, it becomes extremely easy to manage these monitors and these configuration items from a mass update standpoint. So if someone does replace or upgrade an application and the log file's changed, you can either do an import or do a list update to all of the monitors for that application, no matter what agent that it's deployed on. You can do the bulk update to change that location rather than have to go visit each one individually and then push them out or deploy them and wait for the server to come back up if it's down for maintenance. Those types of things are no longer necessary. And then from a reporting standpoint, it's very nice being able to tie the reporting of the alerts and events that are coming into the system directly back to the monitors that were defined to generate those events. You can see reports like which of my monitors are generating the most events, and then let's say you also want to tie event to incident management or even problem management. You can walk that down to say, show me show me which events end up in generating the most incidents or the most problems. And then you can use that to focus on the ones that are have the highest opportunity for revamping. You can use that to identify which ones maybe need to be expanded to go into more in depth, so you can get more proactive with them so they aren't turning into incidents as much. All those types of post-activity reporting and process improvement reporting is available by having all this encapsulated within the same tool set. The architecture of what we built here is a little bit twofold. There is a custom developed agent that does run on a server. It is a C# application basically that's running as a service. That agent will check in with the ServiceNow instance on some interval. Typically you would do this type of thing once or twice a day. For this demo, it's doing it every couple of minutes just so that we have some speedy results. Once it checks in to the ServiceNow instance, it's actually going to download all of the policy configuration settings for its agent. So all of the policies that it needs to use to monitor all these instructions, it pulls those down and also checks in with the instance to say, hey, I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm alive. Then it runs again, at an interval, but for a demo, it's running every minute. But it will cycle through all of those policies every minute to check to see if there's anything that it needs to take action on. Some policies you may want to run every hour. Some of them you may want to run every minute. The agent's going to look every minute to check and see if there's any policies that it's now their turn to run. On the ServiceNow side, assuming the agent detects or executes a policy and detects an event, it's going to forward that event up to ServiceNow, and then ServiceNow is going to make a couple decisions using transform scripts. It's going to look to see if the agent is disabled or if the policy is disabled. Maybe the agent or the policy is under maintenance. If it's disabled, then it will suppress that and not create the actual incident. And the reason we do that is there may be some lag time. Because these monitors are running very frequently, there may be some lag time between when you actually start your change and when you actually indicate that or actually turn that agent off. So you can indicate that the agent is in maintenance, and then the 5 or 10 minutes it takes you to log onto the server and actually physically stop the agent, you won't get events in between that gap. It's based on your definition, not the actual when the agent is running or not. There's also a check to see if there's already an active ticket for this particular monitor. So if you've got an event to monitor the C drive, if it sends that event and then later on it tries to send another one, if that event is not closed, it will suppress it completely. There's also another check to see if it's being suppressed. So because these monitors are related to one another as CIs, you can actually put in a suppression policy. So I can say that the monitor for service 123 is suppressed by the disk monitor, because in my environment, if the disk is full, then this service typically fails. So you can actually put in that suppression, and it will log that it suppressed it, but it doesn't actually create the event. And then there's an extra scenario where it doesn't actually suppress the event, but if you supply a parent monitor for a monitor, so if I say, process monitor 1 is a parent of process monitor 2, any events that get created for process monitor 2 will select any active events for its parent monitor as its parent event. And I'll actually show that when we get into the demo so you can see it a little more visually. From a technical standpoint, some of the components that we use to build this out, on the ServiceNow side, we use the table extensions. So, the events that we're generating are built off of the task table, so you can still do, your workflow or your task management practices. The definitions of the monitors and the agents are extended off of the CMDB, so they're actually classes in the CMDB. That way we inherit all of the benefits and capabilities that come with CMDB and the relationships and the fields and those types of things. We also use a web service import set. That's the primary component that allows us to communicate between the agent and ServiceNow. All of the instructions that come from ServiceNow or get sent to ServiceNow by the agent are being done through the use of these web services and import sets. We use the transform map on the incoming events. So the events that are being sent by the agent are managed inside of a transform map. That's correlating the fields. So, it's translating the fields that the agent uses into the fields in the actual events table. And it also does the post-processing activities where we check to see if there's already an active event. We check to see if there's already, to see if there's a parent or if it needs to be suppressed. That's all done in the transform map script. There's also a CMDB relationships. I mentioned, having the policies as CIs allows you to relate them together, and that CMDB relationship capability is really what's at the heart of us being able to drive suppression and correlation. And then from an agent standpoint, I mentioned this earlier, but the agent technology is basically a custom-built C# application. It's running as a service on the server, and it uses web services to communicate up to ServiceNow. Now, before we get into the demo, why an agent? There's a bit of a battle that always rages between different schools of monitoring. Of should I use an agent-based monitoring solution or should I do it agentless? Both sides really have good points, but they also come with their own sets of challenges. In our case, an agent was preferable because we're really trying to do in-depth service, in-depth monitoring on a server. And that really goes beyond the capabilities of what SNMP can really do for you. So putting an agent on there allows us to monitor the server in a way that's efficient, not only from a server performance standpoint, but also from a network standpoint. If we were to try to monitor some of this stuff with an agentless monitor, we would have to use RPC calls or use WMI to remotely connect. And those types of things can typically chew up a lot of network traffic. Especially when you start talking about deploying this type of thing to a global enterprise where you may have sites who have limited capacity on their local traffic. But we are actually shooting for a hybrid model. We're looking at adding some network level monitoring, some device, network device level monitoring that is based on SNMP. We don't have it to demo today, but Cameron Stone is on the call, and he's really kind of spearheading that agentless piece of it. And he does actually have a proof of concept that we've gone through in the last couple of days, and it's working very well. So hopefully pretty soon we'll also have some SNMP-based agentless monitoring that we can demo for you. And with that, we'll go into the demo. So I'm on my Fruition instance here. You see at the top I've just got my FruSite application, and FruSite's just what I decided to call this. We've got a couple things that we're using to manage here. We've got the agents. Move that over. So these agents are actually the physical representations of the agent. This is what the agent checks in with. This is how we know what version they're on. It's really the central place where we can have kind of an understanding of what agents we've deployed, what servers they're deployed on, what status they're in, that type of thing. This is really nice because we have a last check-in field that we've added. So I mentioned the agent checks in and talks to our ServiceNow instance on an interval. This check-in allows me to, at a glance, understand what's the health of my environment, right? How many agents do I have that are not communicating with me? And then if I do have some, I can very quickly trace back to the server and see if there are any open change records for that device. There's also the version. Version is another nice one if you're going through an upgrade. So let's say you have version 1 deployed and you're upgrading to version 2. As you start pushing that agent out and deploying that into your environment, the agent itself will automatically check in and tell the instance what its version number is. So you can see I've got 2 old ones here that have not checked in a while, and they were on version 1 or 0.1, and now my new agent is version 1.01, so I can see that this one is checked in, it's healthy, and it has been upgraded to the new version. So if you have, if you're in an environment where you have thousands of servers, you can easily get reports to show you, how many of your agents are on the old version, how many of your agents have not checked in the last 24 hours, those types of things. Now we also have the monitors. So I'm going to open the agent record here, and you'll notice at the bottom, because each monitor is tied to an agent, I can see all the monitors for this specific agent. So it's a very easy, very intuitive view where you can kind of go into an agent and see what that agent's doing, and then you can drill down directly into a monitor. And then from the left nav, I can also go and see all of the monitors for this environment. Now the monitors themselves are structured in a way that basically the administrator or the end user is going to supply all the information that the agent needs in order to not only watch the server or watch the environment for that event, but also what that event needs to do when it occurs. So we've got the agent that this monitor is for. If we wanted a correlation to another type of monitor, we could put that here. We have what assignment group we want this monitor to be assigned to. And the beauty of this is you can put this directly into this event, but if you're using the assignment rules portion of ServiceNow, where you can use conditions to decide who to assign it to, you can easily use that to decide where these events get assigned because they're extended off of task, and the assignment rules work for any task. So you can hard code it in here, or you can do a conditional-based approach to decide who it gets assigned to. The relate CI is basically a field where we can hard code what configuration item to relate to this event when it fires. Again, this could be blank, or you could use other logic to decide what CI it is if that information is available to you. We have a status field where we can identify if this monitor is currently installed and working, or if we're doing maintenance on it. These are the out-of-the-box statuses. I haven't modified them. Some of these may or may not make sense based on your environment, but that's easily manageable by identifying what choices you want to be available. We also have a type. So the type of monitor will drive the content of the form. So this one is a Windows disk. So you can see it's asking me what's the disk name and then what preferred free percent I want. If it was a process, you can see now it's switching over to process name and preferred state. Same thing with service. So it's gonna tailor the form to simplify your data entry, so you don't have to know which fields are required and which ones aren't. It's going to tell you all of that. So it's an intelligent form. We also have the check every field. The check every is basically a polling interval. So how often does the agent need to check to see if this service is running, or to see if this disk is full? And we've got it set to 5 minutes. And you can go to hours, days. It just depends on your individual case for that particular monitor. We also have the impact, urgency, and priority. This does align with ServiceNow's out-of-the-box matrix for defining priority. If you're not using that, or if you prefer to have your own, you can certainly modify that to either only use priority or use a different calculation model that's perfectly capable to meet your needs. Down towards the bottom, we also have the related items, and this is where I mentioned that we're doing suppression. So this particular disk monitor will suppress the Service 1 and Process 1 monitors. So this process monitor is for the cmd.exe process, and the Service 1 is for the SNMP trap process. So if this disk policy has fired and there's an active event, which you can see down at the bottom, there is. Here's an active event, so this one is currently in flight. Because this is active, these two policies will not generate new events. They will come in and enter the queue, but the transform process will prevent them from cutting incidents or cutting events because they're being suppressed. And instead, it's logged in here. So you can see transform, we suppress that event because this event is firing, right? So you still have visibility into what's being suppressed in case something that you don't want to be suppressed is being suppressed. You can go in and clean some of that up. You can do reporting and kind of get all that capability as well. So that's a disk monitor. I'll show you some of the other ones. Here's a process. So again, we just apply a process name and then whether we want it to be running or not running. And then we also have the service one. Same thing, running or not running. And then you just supply the service name. One really cool feature about this, let's say you're a discovery customer, or let's say you have services in your CMDB. You can easily take this field and turn it into a reference field so that you actually physically reference the CI for that service, and you don't have to type it in. You don't have to go look it up. All you have to do is use the magnifying glass and go find it. You can do that for the service. You can go for the process, the disk, any of that. And then the final monitor type we have is the log monitor. And this one's a little more complex. We're actually using a couple things to get to this. But basically, we supply what type of monitor it is and how often we want to monitor it. But then we also have log patterns. So down here is where we supply what we want to look for in that log. So if I click on the pattern, you can see we got the path to the log file, whether or not it's a custom one or it's a Windows event log. I'll show you Windows event log in here in a moment. We supply what type of, or what word we want to watch for. I've got this simplified just so that the demo goes, so it's not too tough to look at in the demo. But this will take a regular expression, so I could do, regular expression notation, and that it would take that. Right? So it's just a regex pattern you can supply. Same thing for the exception. So if when the log file reads, or when the log file monitor reads a line in the log file, it's going to look to see if it contains the word error. And if it does contain the word error, but it does not contain the word remove, then it will fire the event. But if it says, error, I have removed policy 123, then it will not fire the event because it having removed in it means it's an exception to the rule. And this can also be a regular expression. The pattern threshold is how many times that this pattern has to match between check intervals. So if you're checking it every 5 minutes and you want this to happen 5 times in 5 minutes in order to consider it an actual event, then you would just put 5 or 3 or however many you want. Pattern options, you can do things like ignore case, group lining, all kinds of fun stuff with the pattern options. So really just regular expression type monitoring. There's also the event log. So this is a custom log file. So if you have applications that's writing to a text-based log file, that's what the simple one is. The Windows one is a little different. You still use the pattern, but you also supply which log, so application or system log, or if you have your own custom log, you can add that in here as well. You supply what type of event, and these are the, the out-of-the-box event types in the, Windows event management system. So you got error, warning, information. You've got source. So typically applications will have a specific source that they use. And then you can match on specific numbers. So, an event 100, event 500, we're doing event match and exception on that as well. So what you put up here in these fields is what will automatically generate this pattern. So this is the config file, basically, for this particular pattern. And then this config is the whole collection of all, this is all of the config patterns for this particular policy. So all 4 of these will roll up into this big config file that the agent will download and use when it checks the monitors. Now, why, what are we going to get out of doing all this work? Well, we get the events, right? So these are events that have been firing. I turned a bunch of these off. They've been kind of generating throughout the day. But you can see I've got my disk space is over 99%. I've got some log matches. I've got some services down. So if I open this particular policy, or this particular event, I can see there was a log match detected by this particular policy, and then this is the line that it detected, so conflict detected. So that's the actual line from the log file. It gets copied into the work notes or into the activity log. And then at the bottom, if this were a parent, those would show up as well. I think I have one in here. So here's a parent event. And you can see down here, these are the children. So this service is down. And because this particular process may be tied to that parent, may be tied to that service, it generated both events and then put them together as a parent-child type correlation. And then as I showed you earlier, if there was suppression going on, you can see these events are being suppressed. So if I go to event 36, the fact that this disk is currently full, according to this policy, means that that particular monitor was not being allowed to generate an event. From a technical standpoint, for those of you on the call that may be interested in the web services side of things, this is the event queue. So this is the queue where all of the events that are coming in are put prior to them being transformed into an actual event. So, before they're suppressed, so for the ones that did get suppressed, like this one was suppressed, it's still in the queue, so you can still report on total number of events and all of that, but you're preventing them from causing teams to have to go do work by closing them out because you basically decided that, yes, you sent me this event, but it's not a candidate for anyone to do any kind of action on it. I'll open up one more here. So you can see it generated the policy. So I can trace back and forth between all of these environments. And then from a policy, or from a monitor, I can see all the events that it's been generating. So as you can see, there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of capabilities. There's room to grow. We want to add the SNMP-based monitoring. There's a lot of things that we want to extend this to. But I think it's a really good start and really shows some of the benefits of being able to use the platform that ServiceNow puts in front of you from a development standpoint to create and design solutions that you don't have to be afraid of. I think, if you look across the industry, there's a lot of apprehension whenever the word customization gets used. And to some degree that's justified. If you want to be careful customizing out of the box things, and you don't want to take something that a vendor designed to do one purpose and completely change that. But ServiceNow's approach to that is not to just tell you, don't modify the way incident works. They give you a platform where you can basically build your needs of what you do for incident or event management into a solution that doesn't necessarily butt heads with their vision of it, right? Being able to create your own tables that extend off of task, being able to create your own fields that align to the data types and the structure that you need in order to run your business can be done in ServiceNow in a way that doesn't prevent you from being able to upgrade. It can be done in a way that allows you to manage it long term, to scale it up to larger and larger environments as your businesses continue to grow and become more successful. It's a very robust platform that really eliminates a lot of the need for all of that angst around what happens if I build my own custom tool. And with that, the demo's over. Before we jump into answering questions, I will say if there's some questions I don't get to today, please stay in touch with us. I will try to follow up on any questions we don't get to verbally through email. And then following the webinar, follow us on Twitter. We've got our Twitter handle here. You can find us on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn. And then you can also visit our website, fruitionpartners.com. For those of you who've been to our website, but it's been a while, I'd encourage you to go back. We recently just did a bit of redesign on the website, and it is awesome. I love the new structure. It's a lot easier to find stuff. Things like our most recent webinar are right there on the front page. So you can really find your way around and really see what things we do, what we're all about on that new website a lot more efficiently than you probably could have if you're experiencing from the old site. And just a quick note on the webinar today, the webinar is recorded. It will be posted hopefully sometime next week. Assuming the transfer process goes well, we'll get it on the website, and you'll be able to link it to your friends or any of your colleagues who maybe weren't able to make it, and you think it'd be valuable for them to listen in. Send them the link, and hopefully they'll find it valuable as well. So I'm gonna pull up some questions here. There's a question about the agent types being all related to Windows. We are looking at moving those out and doing Linux and HPUX and some of the other operating systems. As I mentioned, Cameron has already made great strides in doing SNMP, so we can get some of the network devices and even SNMP level monitoring for servers. But the plan right now is to take a really solid implementation of the Windows model and then extend that same structure over to Unix environments and add a couple other things like syslog, that type of thing, so some of the more Unix-based monitoring data points that are available, and extend what we've got and to use those as well. So that's coming. One question about how the agents is packaged. It is in an MSI format. It's basically it's a Windows Service installer that's generated from Windows Visual Studio development environment. So it's a fully supported MSI. If you have things like runbook automation, or if you have other deployment management tools, you can certainly build the agent installation process into that to completely automate the deployment. And again, another one of the beautiful points about ServiceNow is if you have Service Catalog, you can automatically provision that as well. So a user submits a Service Catalog request to have a monitor on a server. It gets approved. The runbook automation workflow or your integration with whatever other runbook automation tools you may have will automatically kick that deployment off and report up into their Service Catalog request that it was completed. Still going through a couple more on the types of monitors. Yeah, there seems to be a good bit of interest in us monitoring, doing the Linux type environments, and that's very near coming. There's a question, a really good question on how to assign a monitor for all servers. So let's say you have you want to watch an event for every single server. There's a couple ways to do that. The ServiceNow is out of the box. Bulk import and list edit processes is a quick way to do that. So if you wanted to create a new one for all of your servers, you could dump all your servers into Excel and then define that monitor and then import it using a template. Otherwise, if that's a common use case, it's extremely simple to go into ServiceNow and create a request or a UI action or some type of automation that will dynamically create those records for you based on a little bit of input. And that's certainly something that we can very easily turn out. Another really good question about interfacing with something like SCCM or Nagios or some of the other monitoring tools. Actually, it would integrate with those very well. The real important piece is that if you want to take the monitoring management interface that we built in ServiceNow and have it use your own monitoring tool rather than the custom agent that we developed, that monitoring tool would basically need to be able to be provided a config file, or would need to be able to accept some kind of command line entry where we can either from that tool's central management location pull that information down on some kind of schedule and then just keep them in sync, or you would need to have it basically be configurable to talk to our instance instead of its central management environment. So Nagios is one of the more open source ones. So Nagios, that would be a good example of where you wouldn't necessarily have to use Nagios's core implementation. You could kind of take that and update some of the config files and some of the content of Nagios to have it point to our instance to get its instructions, rather than look back to the central environment for its config files. And just a couple more, and then I think we'll be done. Can it take advantage of existing SNMP MIBs? That's a really good question. I would expect that it could, but I think Cameron would be a better person to answer that since he's doing the SNMP portion. Cam, are you still on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect. So did you hear the question?
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, basically any MIBs that are going to be installed on the MIB server are accessible. So from whichever vendor you might be using, if you get the MIB library and install it on the MIB server, we have access to those MIBs and can pull just about anything out there. So any OIDs, it's pretty much endless with the SNMP. I'm mainly focused with the networking stuff at this point, as we are working on the Linux side as well. So between Linux and the Linux agent, the Windows agent, and then the SNMP devices for network, we pretty much should have everything covered.
Great, thanks Cam. I appreciate you helping me with that one. There's only two more questions. One of them was what server platforms. I mentioned earlier Windows is there now. Linux is coming. When we do Linux, we'll do it in a way that it's more Unix-based, so that way it's extendable to HPUX or Linux. From a Windows standpoint, it'll work on pretty much any version of Windows post Windows 2000. So 2003, 2008, 2008 R2. I'm pretty sure it'll work on 2000, but to be honest with you, I haven't tested it on that yet, so I don't want to give you a firm yes or no on it. But if you have a use case for that, we can certainly talk it through and see if there's anything we need to watch out for with monitoring Windows 2000. And then I'm not entirely familiar with the tool that's mentioned in this question, but it says we're using PRTG Network Monitor. I don't recognize that acronym off the top of my head, but as I mentioned, the big thing there is when you define your monitoring config, you're providing a data set. You're providing the content in the monitor to tell whatever monitoring tool all the information it needs in order to execute that monitor and watch for that event. So assuming that network monitoring tool can take input from an external system and use that input to create, define, or activate a monitor, then it's certainly a candidate for this type of integration or custom application. And I think that is it for the questions. So unless we get another question here in a couple seconds, I'll wrap it up. Again, check us out on social media sites. Hit up our new website. It's beautiful. And I just want to thank everybody for dialing in today. Hopefully we've, at the very least, generated some ideas for you on how maybe you can take ServiceNow's development platform and add either custom tools or add some robust enhancements to your current processes, so you can really go beyond just doing IT service management and really take it to a level where you're adding tools and capabilities that helps your individual IT teams execute and manage their environments more effectively through automation, through much tighter coupling, not just integration but actual data coupling, so that you can realize even more value out of the investment that you make in your ITSM tools. And with that, do one last check. And with that, thanks again. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your days.